So in this report, I'm going to go over the models. The scene that I'm loading up is just a simple scene with all the pre-made models that we have. So here I've got the three cubes. I got the normal unit cube, the repeated texture cube, six face texture cube, unit pyramid, texture pyramid, and then the sphere. Okay. Just as a side note, I created a scene base class uh, that basically functions as a container for all the initialization that I do in managing the draw scene and updates. So I say I have an initialization, update, and draw scene, and that's what I'm using to basically just clear out DX apps so it's easier to manage. So like here's the model scene that I just rendered. And I also have scenes for my final scene and then another scene just to show the mirror effect. And here's the model scene itself. So yeah, just a initialization, update, draw. This is where I just hold everything. But back to the models. Uh, this is where we create the pre-made models. In this scene, I don't have any custom models, but in my final scene, I do have models that I imported, and those can be that can obviously be done. So yeah, going to the actual model class, it does use the updated standard vertex with position, UVs, normal, color, and mesh number. And then just different ways to set the standard vertex, um, triangle indices, and see. So here's where we get the specific pre-made model for enums. And then, like I said, you can create a model either from an array of standard vertex and triangle indices, um, a pre-made model, or a custom model from a file. And models also can have a a multiple number of meshes to them. So here's where we create the model from a given array of standard vertex and indices, where we create it from a file. And then the pre-made models, this is all done in the model tools, which I'll get to in a second. And then here's where we load it from a file. And then this is where we load the model to the GPU, create its vertex buffer and index buffer. And here is just some mesh management, seeing if a mesh is valid and getting how many meshes the model has. Just setting to context, and we can render either the whole model or only a specific mesh of the model. Okay, go into the model tools. So here in the model tools where we create the pre-made models. So here's the unit box. All the UVs are 0 and the normals, depending on the side, it's the up, forward, or left vector, or the opposite of those vectors depending on the side. Um, here's the repeated texture. The UV values are actually set. They're all set, the same values though. Since it's a repeated texture for the six face texture, the UV values are specific to this layout. Let's see if I can find it. So yeah, based off this layout, that's how the UVs are set. Unit pyramid, UVs are 0, and just getting the normal of each face. And then for the repeated pyramid texture, same thing, except the UV values are actually changing. And then the unit sphere, uh, based off of the number of vertical and horizontal slices, to create a sphere. And here's where I do calculate the positions of each vertex. And here is where I set all of the indices for each triangle of the sphere. Okay, that's for the pre-made models. And here's the mesh separator that we were given that separates all the meshes for a given model. This is all given to us. Uh, and that I'll go to the flat plane. So here's the flat plane. This is also given to us, but here's how it's made. And then for the skybox, so the skybox basically just a inverted cube with all of the faces pointing inwards instead of outwards. And for the skybox, this is the layout that I use for the textures. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. So here's the layout that I use for the skybox texture. Right here would be the top, the forward, bottom, left, right, and the back. And then it's just similar to setting up any of the other pre-made models. It's just setting up it's just making sure the UVs and normals are correct. Okay, and then just rendering it, just setting it to context and then rendering it just like any other model. And then for the terrain, so here's where we create the terrain. Terrain's created from a height map, and you can set the size of the terrain, how tall it is, where the Y value for the terrain starts, and the UVs for the terrain. And these are just functions that I use to calculate the specific parts of to create the terrain, so the vertices, triangle lists, and normals, and then just index functions to help in the creation. So here's where we start creating the terrain based off of the file. So here's where I create the vertices right here. Get the positioning for each one based off of the value of the red channel for each uh, texel. And then here's where I create the triangle list. And for the normals, I go through um, each triangle in the triangle list, get the indices for that triangle, get the vertices that coincide with those indices, get the face normal based off of those vertices, add the face normal to each vertex, and then once I'm done, I go through all of the vertices and then normalize the accumulated normal. And then here's the index functions, and then just rendering it just like the other models. And oh, and don't think I mentioned it, but for the skybox as well, we can set the size of it, and I'll show that in another part. But that should be it for the models.